Hi, everyone. My name is Kyle Abel. I want to thank you for attending this session, and I want to start by asking you a question. When you think about your sales enablement practice, would you describe it more as a calm flowing stream or an uncontrolled flood? Now, while you think about that answer, I want to introduce myself. My name again is Kyle Abel. I serve as the Director of Sales Enablement at Guidewire Software. I actually began my career at a Fortune 100 technology company. I started in professional services implementing the software. I moved over to the sales team and performed the demos and the workshops and the POCs in the solution engineering role. I moved to the product side, spent a little time as a product manager, and spent just a little bit of time in product marketing. In 2012, I had not yet heard of the term sales enablement as a role or a discipline. And as I was investigating a role at Guidewire for sales enablement, I found it was a great melding of all of the different attributes of these roles that I really, really enjoyed. So in 2012, I joined the sales enablement team at Guidewire. And Guidewire is a software as a service platform for P&C insurers to run their business. I joined in 2012. At that time, we served 100 sellers, selling 3 products, and we were a team of 5 sales enablement professionals. Now, if you fast forward to today, we serve 220 sellers in 13 countries, selling 11 products and solutions, and we are now a team of 8 sales enablement professionals, and I am privileged to lead that team. Now, going back to our question, I think we would all agree that we would prefer to have our sales enablement practice thought of by us as well as, and more importantly, I think, as our sellers, the end users, as a calm flowing stream. And when we're in this stream state, some of the attributes you might think of is consistent flow of enablement in a predictable volume and cadence, and highly consumable by the sellers. Now, what we found in the 8 years I've been at Guidewire is while we intended to be in the stream state, often we found ourselves in more of a flood state, and I'm sure many of you can relate to that. And when we're in a flood state, the impact it has on our sellers is that the volume of content is unpredictable and it's ultimately inconsumable. There's just too much at one time. And from an enablement perspective, it's unmanageable to create that much content in such a small amount of time. So at Guidewire, we have spent a lot of time thinking about this problem, and we still struggle with it, certainly, but we have made definitely some improvements in the process that we thought we would share with you, and hopefully it helps. And I'm going to present to you 3 steps that you can take to control the flood. And these are the same 3 steps that we've used that have really helped us to reduce this problem. And the 3 steps are this. The first step is to audit your current volume of content. And in the context of this session, when we say content, we're talking about training, we are talking about whether that's live events or more self-service video recordings. It could also be actual assets that are used by the sellers in the process of the deal, whether those are internal assets like maybe battle cards, or they could be external assets in the form of data sheets and presentation slide decks and things like that. So after you've audited your current volume of content that you're currently putting out, you want to determine what your ideal target volume is for your company. And once you have that, you can then create and communicate what I call the 12-3-1 plan. And we're going to dive into each of these. Now, an important word here is your. There is no the ideal target volume. There's no ideal, there's no the 12-3-1 plan. It's all going to be specific to you and your sellers and their needs, as well as your organization and the industry that you serve. So let's go to step 1, which is to audit the current volume of the content that you're putting out. It's very important that you have you have a reasonably accurate estimate on how much you're actually putting out today. Before you move to step 2, you want to know kind of your starting point. So when you suggest what the ideal target is, it's not going to be something wildly different that's going to have, it's going to be hard, that would be hard to hit, right? So you need to know where you're starting from. And I'm going to suggest that you look at it, first of all, you have to look at it from the seller's point of view, right? Not your own. It's very important. And I'm going to give you 4 different lenses to look at it so you can get a full kind of holistic view of all the content that the sellers are being asked to come out of the field, stop selling, and consume. And the first lens is by training type. So certainly there's going to be some enablement training and content that's going to be around, it's going to be in the form of live events, right? These could be the sales kickoff events or the business reviews, internal webinars at Guidewire. We have an every other Friday internal webinar for training. They could also be workshops, like your onboarding workshops, right? So that's one training type. The next training type is going to be the asynchronous training. These are going to be self-service trainings or recordings or videos that are consumed on demand. They could be internal newsletters. We have a monthly newsletter, kind of a in case you missed it newsletter to our sellers at Guidewire. They could be those sales assets and collateral that maybe are produced by product marketing, for example, that as sales enablement, we are pushing out to the field and making sure that they know how to use those. And it's very important that you look beyond just what sales enablement is producing. And there are other groups in your organization or in the industry that is also producing training. And if you are asking your sellers to consume that training, if they have to consume that training in some cases, then you want to make sure you get a full accounting, a full assessment of how much training is coming at them. So examples of this could be human resources training, right? Or if you're in a technology company like Guidewire, we do quarterly InfoSec trainings to maintain certain certifications. Or maybe there are industry events and trainings that you want your sellers to go to. Again, just get a very broad view from the seller's perspective. The second lens you want to look at is by role. And this is really to recognize that different roles may have different requests on their time, right? So your business development, your inside sales is what we call them at Guidewire, may have a different that number of hours that's being pushed to them may be different than your solution engineers or your solution consultants, for example. So you want to look at it through the role lens as well. The third lens is by schedule. So you want to actually map this out in quarters or months and see just if there's any natural seasonality to your enablement calendar. And then the fourth lens is by competency. Now here is a very simple kind of 4-quadrant competency, but certainly use the one that you're already using. But the idea here is let's look at the content that's being pushed out in a given year, and let's kind of categorize it by competency to see if there's any opportunity to even that out a little bit. So when we went through this process at Guidewire, our audit in a number of hours per year of training came to about 110 hours to 140 hours per year, depending on the role of the sellers, that we were asking the sellers to come out of the field and consume this training. Now, at this point, we're not judging whether this is too high or too low. We're just getting the actual number, which is the most important thing. But in addition, or maybe even more importantly than the actual number, we realized a couple insights about the way that we were enabling our sellers. And the first one is we were creating what I called a flood and drought enablement cycle. And it was because we had these big kind of floods of events and training that were happening within a month or two. And then conversely, we would have other months that we didn't have much training at all. And that's because we had things like the sales kickoffs, and we do twice a year launches. So we would have launch training, and we have a user conference that would all kind of get bundled within a 4 to 6 week period. And that created this flood event. And the end result we were observing was our launch training, the adoption of our launch training both in the number of people that were attending live and then the people that were going back and watching the recordings, really suffered because sellers were self-selecting what enablement content they were going to consume because there was not enough hours in the day in the working day to consume all of it. So that was a big kind of aha moment when we looked at it from a timing perspective. The other one is the other big insight was around the core competencies, and we were inadvertently creating blind spots for our sellers. So if we look at that core competency quadrant and that product quadrant, if we were to kind of map out how much of our training in a given year was dedicated to the different quadrants, it looked like this, where it was very, very heavy by almost a 3 to 4 to 1 margin compared to the other quadrants. And the end result there is we ended up with sellers that were very, very knowledgeable in the products and selling or demonstrating and talking about the capabilities of the products. They were not quite as well-rounded in the other quadrants, the other selling competencies. So we had to get a little more deliberate about that. So by going through this process, you can not only get to your number, but you can get to some key insights. So I'm going to help you out, and I'm going to give you a spreadsheet that's going to help you through this process. And I'll warn you, it's not a super easy or fast process to get a reasonably accurate count. And you don't have to necessarily try to get it to where it's 100% to the half hour accurate. You just want it to be a good, high confidence number that you can have conversations with your sales leaders. So I'm going to give you the spreadsheet. Well, has the tabs for the different lenses, and you can really have a head start in this process. Now, once you have your number, you can move to step 2, and you can determine what your ideal target volume is compared to your actuals. So I'm going to give you a very simplistic formula. It's not meant to necessarily give you the number itself. It's more to highlight some key variables that will influence what that number is. So the first variable that has a high impact on the number of hours that's going to be relevant for your sellers is the size of the portfolio of products or services or solutions that you're selling. So if you have something that, if you have a portfolio that's relatively small, maybe it's a single product even, the volume of training, the amount of training that's needed in a given year may be less than if you had 10 or 15 or 20 different products. And then if you multiply the pace of change, that will also have a high degree of impact on the volume of training in a given year. So if you're in an industry where the pace of change is actually relatively low, maybe less training is needed. But if you're in an industry like Guidewire is technology, which moves very rapidly, and we do releases every six months, that pace of change is actually very quick. So that's going to require more training hours to keep up. Now, a couple just examples of other industries, just for a frame of reference. If we look at lawyers, depending on the state, require about 15 hours of continuing education a year to maintain their licenses. That's because the size of the portfolio is usually small. Lawyers typically will specialize in certain parts of the law, and the pace of change is really slow. The laws may iterate and change a little bit from one year to another, but it's typically not a big, huge change that they have to spend a whole lot of time looking at. Another industry, if we look at doctors, medical field, again, depending on the state, about 50 hours per year is what's required by the different states. And that's because the size of the portfolio is going to be a little larger, right? It's the whole human body and all the different systems typically. But the pace of change, especially when you think of standard of care, is actually quite slow, slower than we would obviously want, especially right now during a pandemic. But the larger portfolio means larger number of hours. Now, once you have your kind of a target, a possible target that you want to start discussing, you should absolutely review this with the sales leadership. And the question that you need to have them answer is how much time out of the field, so how much time where sellers are not selling is reasonable for the demands of your industry, your organization, your sellers. Now, when we went through this process, we looked at our portfolio as being relatively large. So 11 products. Pace of change, I already mentioned, was very fast. So we came to a target of about 80 to 100 hours per year. But we did not go to the sales leadership and say, we think it's 80 to 100 hours. What do you think? Because there's not a whole lot of context around that, right? It's hard to grasp what 100 hours means in the context of a year. So instead, we converted that to, and I recommend you convert that to days or partial days per month or per week or per quarter or something smaller. So for example, 96 hours per year is equal to about a day per month that we're asking the sellers to come out of the field and learn. Is that reasonable? For us, for Guidewire, yes, that's a reasonable request. For you, that number is going to be different. So maybe it's a half day per month, or maybe it's a full day per quarter, or whatever the number is. But highly recommend that you break it down into something a little more tangible. So once you have your target number agreed to, now you can create and communicate your 12-3-1 plan. So what is a 12-3-1 plan? It starts with your annual 12-month plan. Then every quarter, you're going to refine that plan into your quarterly review. And then each month, you're going to do a monthly sprint to further refine the quarterly review. So they all influence each other. Now at Guidewire, we've gone through this a couple different ways. We found for us 80% of the value was in the planning and the forward-looking planning process. We have gone through periods where we try to track actuals and look back and track actuals to our estimates. And for us, we didn't quite have the systems in place to make that a very valuable exercise, but we find a tremendous amount of value in creating the plans and communicating the plans. It starts with the annual plan. So we look at the 12-month plan, and we can, with a reasonable degree of accuracy, we can kind of put a pin in some of our big rocks, like the big events that we know. We're going to do a sales kickoff roughly in this time. We've got our 2 releases roughly in these time periods. We have our mid-year business review, right? We have our big rocks. Next, once we have those rocks in place, we can create buffers around those because we know those are going to be kind of spikes in the enablement volume, right? So we want to create some space so we don't double up during those times. And once we have that buffer in place, now we can slot in other enablement activities, or at least spots to put in other enablement activities. And again, the whole point is to just smooth out the peaks and the valleys, to smooth out the flood and drought cycle. Now, it's very important once you have this laid out, you review it with your stakeholders. And we'll talk about why that's really important. But in the terms of this activity, when we say stakeholders, we're talking about not only the end consumers and the sales leadership, but also the producers, the content creators, right? So this is product marketing, product management, corporate marketing, right? You want everyone that's involved with creating the enablement and consuming the enablement to all be aligned with what the plan is. Now, once you have your annual plan, you're going to move into your quarterly review. Now, once you get to your quarterly review, you've already marked out what the big rocks are, so you can put that on the calendar and adjust a little bit if needed. But now you can start filling out your other enablement activities around and respecting the buffer time around your big rock event. And then very important that you review that with your stakeholders so they can be very well informed about what's coming in the next quarter. And then take that a step further and look at it from a monthly perspective. And here you can further refine, you can adjust the number of days, or move things around or add things that are needed. And again, you want to review with the stakeholders on a monthly process as well. So why is it so important to review these 3 plans with your stakeholders? It's so you can avoid a scenario which we experienced at Guidewire, which I call backfilling. And when I say backfilling, what I mean is other groups could be the sales team themselves, it could be product marketing, product management, that if they're not very familiar with the plan, they may start creating their own enablement activities and enablement events. And you end up those events end up contributing to a flood, an inadvertent flood of enablement. So the way around it, so this will eliminate 90% of everything, is communicate with your stakeholders often. If they know what's coming, and especially when you get to the monthly plan, the topics that are coming, then you can kind of head off at the pass some of the backfilling activities that may be brewing. And it gives them a chance to have input into the calendar as well. So those are the 3 steps to controlling the flood. You want to audit your current volume of training. You want to determine your ideal target volume of training in a given year, and you want to create and communicate your 12-3-1 plan. Again, my name is Kyle Abel. Thank you so much for attending, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have. All right. Thank you all very much for attending. We've got some good questions already in the chat. I will start with Kimberly asked, what's the average number of hours per month recommended? As I said in the session, it's going to be different for your organization to my organization, right? I think the key is to communicate with the sales leadership and figure out what's a reasonable request, and that will just be a dialogue between stakeholders, I think. But I did supply those other organizations just as kind of a gut check, right? If you're at 500 hours, that's probably a little much. But yeah, it's just going to be a conversation. Kate asked, we're small, we don't have a schedule per se, and so how do we count what we've currently been doing? You know, it's challenging even for us. We have always had a calendar of sorts, but it was still it's an exercise for sure to go back and look at the last 12 months and get an accurate, a reasonably accurate counting. You could kind of look over the next year and what you're planning. If it's much harder to look back, you know, you could take a sample over the next 6 months and kind of prorate it out. But yeah, there's no easy way around that. You just have to kind of dig through emails and other calendars that you have and do it as a team to make sure that you're looking across all the stuff that your team is putting out. But that's I wish I had an easy answer for you. Connor says that you all are moving out of the initial enablement creation phase. Congratulations. Going from 0 to 100, I would like to say it doesn't, it slows down. I don't think it will. I think it'll always feel like 100 miles per hour. So how do you put this plan in place and make it so it's actually anticipated and not dreaded by busy sales reps? I think the key is you look at it from their point of view and you schedule with their demands in mind. So really what you're trying to do is actually make it easier for them to consume the material, not necessarily add more material. You're trying to do it and pace it out in a way to where even when they're really busy, you're not going to throw a whole bunch of stuff at them at one time and now they're behind all of a sudden. The whole point is to where they don't get behind, right? And it's very predictable. So that'd be my suggestion there. Don asks, how do you currently conduct your sales kickoffs and trainings? We actually just did our sales kickoff. Our fiscal started in August, so we did virtual sales kickoffs for the first time ever, which was intense for sure. I'm sure you all are experiencing that. So we shortened the overall duration. Instead of doing 4 days in person, we did it 3 days. We shortened the hours per day. So we essentially tried not to recreate what we had been doing live and try to do it in a virtual way. I think that's the ability to focus for that long in a virtual environment is just it's not there. So you're just gonna have to cut some material and really focus on what's most important now. It's my best suggestion there. So really, really great questions. What content types are you finding to be most effective today? Well, everything is virtual, so we are still doing our biweekly webinars. So we've done that for years, and we find that to be the most effective way. But I think supplementing it with more asynchronous material, whether that is as pre-work or as post-work, and kind of drip it out, I think has been really helpful too. So just try not to. We really we have those every 2 week events that really anchor our schedule. So we really try to build stuff around and to latch on to those anchors. That seems to help us quite a bit. I've been helping my sales team mostly with content. Okay, that's great. Lindsay says a lot of your key milestones are related to product. True, and you can tell by the, I mentioned that in our key insights from our audit. Have you faced pushback from sellers on the importance of this role? No, we haven't, and that might be that might have kind of contributed to us overemphasizing the product. We are starting to see a desire to broaden and look into those other competencies. So it's great that we saw our natural tendency to overemphasize product, and your quadrant may be different, like whatever competency you may, if you can just recognize that you have a natural tendency as an organization to overemphasize one of those quadrants, then you can proactively plan to lessen that, I think. So that's why the audit is so key. It really gives you insights of what are your natural tendencies, what have you been doing so far. Chloe says, I've heard that you call backfilling also referred as random acts of enablement. I love that. That's exactly right. The biggest impact of this at Guidewire is it's less of a cohesive program or a cohesive schedule for the sellers. And again, I go back to, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the sellers and what's coming at them. And all of a sudden, if they've got enablement not coming just from the enablement team, from all these other teams, it's hard for that all to congeal in a cohesive calendar and narrative and have all the pieces fit together, right? Because you've got ad hoc stuff and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. So to me, that is the biggest drawback of the random acts of enablement, which I love that phrase. Love hear ideas about enabling connections at a virtual sales kickoff. Yeah, so one of the things that we did was, so we use Zoom as our enterprise video conferencing. What we did was we use Slack. So we turned off all of the engagement stuff in Zoom, and we created a Slack channel just for the event, and we really funneled all of the enablement into this Slack channel, including polls, questions, like mid-session questions, surveys at the end of the session, how useful was this? And I think maybe more importantly was we tried to funnel a lot of the fun into the Slack channel. So I was very active in kind of getting that started, posting funny GIFs and the occasional ribbing of people, but it just kind of snowballed into this really, really great large group of people that it's almost like a water cooler as the event was going on. And there were certainly questions being, actual real questions being posed in there as well. But to me, that really took the place of all the banter that you would normally get, out in the hallway or whatever. So I would recommend doing that. On the content front, recently started on the product training. Have you ever done sales kickoff? Yep, just talked about that. Let's see. What is the format or goal competency behind the biweekly webinars? Yeah, for us, it is just a regular, predictable channel of communication that, again, at this point, the whole organization across Guidewire has really keyed in on. This is probably the best way to reach our sellers. They're an hour long. We really focus it 30 to 40 minutes of content max, probably 30 minutes of content, and then the rest Q&A. We've got one person on our team that is just excellent at managing that calendar, managing the presenters, and really amping up the quality. So it is a super high quality event. And I think that has contributed to its effectiveness, and just the fact that at this point, we've been doing that event for 7 years, I think, consistently. And sometimes we'll go a couple extra weeks between events. Sometimes we have to do back-to-back. But yeah, so a lot of great questions. Thank you so much. Please connect with me. We're at the bottom of the hour. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any other questions, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.